Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, November 10th, 2025. I'm Gary Sterhoff. Thank you for joining us. The federal government is inching closer toward reopening after the Senate took the first steps last night by advancing a short-term government funding bill. 8 Democrats broke with their caucus to advance the bill after reaching an agreement with Republicans. And now, word this afternoon, the Senate is voting on that tonight. This agreement, for now, includes funding to reopen the government until January and a vote on the expiring healthcare tax credits next month. Meanwhile, Speaker Johnson has instructed House lawmakers to make their way back here to Washington for possible votes this week. We'll hear from him, both Senate leaders and Senate Democrats who broke from their party coming up. There is, of course, one thing complicating members' return: the ongoing flight cancellations because of the shutdown. The latest reports show more than 5,800 flights have been delayed as of mid-afternoon and nearly 2,000 canceled. That's because of air traffic controller shortages as a result of the shutdown. And their union president talked about how his members are dealing with everything. We'll also hear from him coming up. The Senate started their day at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, they are voting on this funding package that will reopen the government until January. Republican leader Thune began today's Senate session with this.
Mr. President, I'm glad to be able to say that 8 Democrats joined Republicans last night to take the first step to reopen the government. And in the very near future, we will be voting on a final package, a clean continuing resolution until January the 30th, and 3 bipartisan full-year appropriations bills. These bills are the military, construction, VA, agriculture, and legislative branch appropriations, 3 of the 12 bills that Congress needs to pass on an annual basis. And what that means, Mr. President, is that year-long funding for SNAP, for WIC, for veterans, for essential farm programs, and for a number of other critical priorities will be met. Mr. President, I said that we will be voting on the final package in the very near future, and I'm hoping that will be hours and not days. We're on the 41st day of this shutdown. Nutrition benefits are in jeopardy. Air travel is an extremely precarious situation. Our staffs and many, many other government workers have been working for nearly 6 weeks without pay. I could spend an hour talking about all the problems we've seen, which have snowballed the longer this shutdown has gone on. But all of us, Democrat and Republican, who voted for last night's bill are well aware of the facts. And I'm grateful that the end is in sight. But I would encourage every member of this body, Democrat or Republican, pro-bill or anti-bill, not to stand in the way of our being able to deliver the coming relief quickly. The American people have suffered for long enough. Let's not pointlessly drag this bill out. Let's get it done, get it over to the House so that we can get this government open. Mr. President, as I have emphasized since being elected Majority Leader last November, I remain deeply committed to advancing full-year appropriations bills through regular order. And we've drafted this continuing resolution to extend to January 30th specifically to give us more time to get this bipartisan work done. I look forward to taking up additional appropriations bills on the floor in the near future. Mr. President, after 41 days, I'm grateful to be able to say that we are close to getting the government reopened. And again, I ask all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, of both parties, to make it possible for us to quickly pass this bill.
Senate Republican leader John Thune earlier today. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer voted against advancing the bill yesterday. Here's what he had to say earlier.
So, Mr. President, the last 41 days have exposed the depths of Donald Trump's cruelty. He shut the government down longer than any president in American history, took innocent kids, veterans, federal workers as hostages, political hostages, all because he refuses to do anything to fix the health care crisis, and instead keeps pushing policies that will cut people's coverage even more. Look no further than Donald Trump's war on SNAP. Last night, the First Circuit reaffirmed what lower courts have already said. Donald Trump cannot take 42 million hungry people as hostages. He cannot withhold the benefits they need for food for their families. Even now, Donald Trump isn't satisfied. Today, even more cruel, he appealed to the Supreme Court yet again to try and get out of paying full SNAP benefits. The president's done a lot of cruel, nasty, mean things over the years. But going all the way up to the Supreme Court, not once but twice, to ensure kids go hungry is about as cruel a thing as he's ever done. Donald Trump would rather make hungry Americans suffer, make kids suffer, make veterans go hungry and disabled individuals suffer, than do anything to lower health care costs for the American people. The American people will not forget Donald Trump's cruelty and heartlessness over the last 6 weeks. And let me say something else. The American people have now awoken to Trump's health care crisis. Health care is once again at the forefront of people's minds. People now see that premiums are about to skyrocket. They're terrified about how they're going to pay for their insurance. Democrats demanded that we find a way to fix this crisis and quickly, but Republicans have refused to move an inch. So I cannot support the Republican bill that's on the floor because it fails to do anything of substance to fix America's health care crisis. The health care crisis is causing millions of families back home sleepless nights because they don't know how they're going to afford health care insurance so much needed by their families. Doing nothing is unacceptable, but that's the choice the Republican side made in obeisance to Donald Trump. Republicans now own this health care crisis. They knew it was coming. We wanted to fix it. Republicans said no, and now it's on them. When people's out-of-pocket costs double or triple, very soon Americans will know Republicans made it happen. When 60-year-old couples start paying $20,000 a year for health insurance, they'll know Republicans made it happen. When 4 million Americans lose insurance, when kids with cancer are priced out of coverage, when families face financial ruin, they'll know Republicans made it happen.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer earlier today. And again, the Senate taking the next step to move this bill forward today. You can watch it live on C-SPAN 2. And also late this afternoon, support from the bill from the White House.
Do you personally approve of the deal that's happening right now on Capitol Hill to end the government
Well, it
shutdown?
depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
Mr. President, that deal does reverse the mass firings your administration put through during the shutdown. Did you sign off on that, and will you abide by that if this passes?
Well, I will be. I'll abide by the deal. The deal is very good. We're not going to be giving $1.5 trillion to people that came in from jails and from, the gangs and drug dealers and all of these others that they wanted to be given health care, which would have hurt our health care system. I hope that we're going to be able to have a health care where Lindsay and I were discussing it, Jim and I were discussing it, and Katie, we discussed it. We want a health care system where we pay the money to the people instead of the insurance companies. And I tell you, we're going to be working on that very hard over the next short period of time, where the people get the money. We're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars where the people get the money.
So what's in this agreement? It would fund the government through January. It also would contain 3 year-long funding bills for the Departments of Agriculture and Veterans Affairs. It would also reverse the firings of federal workers during the shutdown. And as we said, an agreement from Republicans to hold a separate vote on the expiring health care tax credits by mid-December. And again, the Senate taking the next steps this afternoon to advance this legislation. So last night, who were the Democrats who voted to advance the bill? They were John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, and Maine independent Angus King. He caucuses with the Democrats. Those three have been voting for the Republicans' House-passed bill all along. But last night, they were joined by Jackie Rosen of Nevada, Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, Tim Kaine of Virginia, and one member of leadership, Democratic Whip Dick Durbin. He talked about his vote this afternoon.
Mr. President, after a record government shutdown of 41 days and 14 roll calls failing to reopen it, the situation was clear. Donald Trump and the Senate Republican leadership were unwilling to do anything to reduce skyrocketing health insurance premiums, a terrible problem facing some 24 million American families. The shutdown of the government stopped paychecks for thousands of federal workers, causing real hardship for their families, including our overworked and understaffed air traffic controllers and many other critical members of the federal workforce. Food pantries in my state and across the nation were overwhelmed when President Trump stopped SNAP food payments to 42 million Americans, 1/3 of whom were children. Food pantries being overwhelmed as well by unemployed workers who'd been laid off and furloughed because of the government shutdown. So a group of senators sat down to try to find a bipartisan resolution. After lengthy negotiations, an agreement was reached with the Republican Senate leader, John Thune. We will agree to open the government until January 30th, 2026. During that time, we will pass 3 bipartisan appropriation bills that will fully fund SNAP, WIC, and all the veterans programs and finish our work on the remaining spending bills for this fiscal year. The agreement would also reverse the Trump administration's mass firings during the shutdown and prevent future ones through January 30th. We credit Senator Kaine of Virginia for this provision. Leader Thune has also promised the Democrats an opportunity before mid-December to present a Democratic bill on the floor with proposals to change the law and protect American families from dramatic health care premium increases. It is my fervent hope that this ends up being a bipartisan effort. It would be such an achievement of the Senate to finally return to that status. I've served in the Senate for 29 years, and I've never seen that kind of offer from a Senate majority. During the historic roll call last night, I walked across the aisle and met with Senator John Thune, the Republican leader. I told him that I was counting on him to keep his word on this agreement. He assured me he would. The fate of this effort depends on both the Senate and the House of Representatives. After a 7-week absence, the Speaker Johnson needs to call his members back and join us in the hard work that lies ahead. Many of my friends are unhappy. They think we should have kept our government closed indefinitely to protest the policies of the Trump administration. I share their opinions of this administration, but cannot accept a strategy which wages political battle at the expense of my neighbor's paycheck or the food for his children. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senate Democratic Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois earlier today. Senator Kaine spoke to CNN about his efforts with Republicans to reach this agreement.
The discussions that you were having, was that with the administration? You were saying?
It was really with members of the Republican leadership as well as Shaheen. So I was keeping the Shaheen team informed, but I was dealing with Thune, Katie Britt, and they were dealing with the administration. So I was dealing with both our side and their side, and we went back and forth, an awful lot between Friday night and 5:45 today to get the language set.
And then just on, the threat of these insurance premiums going up for millions of Americans was not enough to get Republicans to agree to extend it. So do you have any sense that has changed among Republicans?
Here, there are two realities. That threat, if it's a drumbeat, it's getting louder every day because people are going on to the market, and they're, not everybody goes on to the market on November 1 when it opens and starts to shop. I mean, some wait a while and they start to shop, and then people are seeing what these prices are going to be, and so that drumbeat is getting louder. It's getting louder and louder, and I had Republicans say to me, "We know we have to fix this, but you got to help us save face." And we put this line in the sand down that we'll only talk about fixing this once you reopen government. And President Trump's insisting upon that. So we're not going to back down. I mean, that seems like kind of an arbitrary position, but I became convinced that they were sincere about that they were not going to talk about it as long as government was shut down. We could have waited for a month or 2 months or 5 months. How many SNAP benefits then would have suffered? They still weren't going to do it, but by voting to reopen, now it's a live discussion. So again, the way I kind of put it, setting aside the federal employee thing, let's just look SNAP and tax credits. We had SNAP recipients suffering and likely to suffer more because even that contingency fund was going to run out before the end of the month. They're suffering, and we had no guarantee and no action on ACA. Now we've got robust funding for SNAP, and we've got a path on ACA. So that is much better than the status quo ante, and that plus what I was able to get for federal employees.
Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine talking to CNN. And here's Senator Shaheen this morning on CBS.
The fact is,
Senator,
what this agreement is going to do is it's going to force Speaker Johnson to bring the House back in. He's been out since the beginning of September. It's going to force him to come back in and to deal with health care and
Senator,
all kinds of other issues.
I apologize for I said Ro Khanna. I could have said Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I could have named a whole bunch of people. There's people on the Senate side as well.
And as I said, they should stay focused on who's responsible for this problem. It's not Chuck Schumer. It's Speaker Johnson, it's President Trump, it's the Republicans who have refused to have a vote on health care. Now we have this opportunity, and we're going to take it, and the people of America will have a chance to see who's on their side.
New Hampshire Democrat Jeanne Shaheen on CBS this morning. Coverage of the Senate as they move this bill forward live on C-SPAN 2. Now, on the other side of the Capitol, House leaders have notified members for a possible vote later this week. Punchbowl News' Jake Sherman reported that House Speaker told members earlier today he's hoping for a Wednesday vote. Speaker Johnson talked to reporters today about his plans and the disruptions the government shutdown has caused.
At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the president's desk. As you all know, and he said as recently as last night, I was with him, and he told the press, he said, we want to get the government open. He's very anxious to get the government reopened and to end the Schumer shutdown. We all are. With regard to the travel challenges, I spoke yesterday at some length with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, my former colleague and good friend, and he lamented the serious situation that we have with air travel in the U.S. He's bent over backwards, as all members of the administration and the cabinet have done in all of their areas of jurisdiction, to try to keep the government working for the people and to mitigate the pain and the harm. But the problem we have with air travel is that our air traffic controllers are overworked and unpaid, and many of them have called in sick. That's a very stressful job, and even more stressful exponentially when they're having trouble providing for their families. And so air travel has been grinding to a halt in many places. And as of Sunday, nearly half of all domestic flights and U.S. flights were either canceled or delayed. And it's a very serious situation. So I'm saying that by way of reminder. I'm stating the obvious to all my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats in the House. You need to begin right now returning to the Hill. We have to do this as quickly as possible. Now, we look forward to the government reopening this week so Congress can get back to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of business to do, as you all know, and we will be working in earnest. There'll be long days and long nights here for the foreseeable future to make up for all this lost time that was imposed upon us. I want to close with something that's important. I think it's important to say that this is genuine. I mean this sincerely. We applaud the 7 Senate Democrats and 1 independent senator who did the right thing. They decided to put principle over their personal politics. And my urgent plea of all my colleagues in the House, and that means every Democrat in the House, is to think carefully, pray, and finally do the right thing and help us to bring an end to the pain of the American people. This has gone on too long. Too many people have suffered, and it's long overdue.
House Speaker Mike Johnson. Now, right now, there are no reports of any House Democrats supporting this bill, but Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was asked about today the Senate Democrats who supported it.
Throughout the shutdown, you referred to your Senate colleagues as courageous for rejecting the 14 previous attempts to reopen the government without an extension to the affordable tax care credits. Those 8 Senate Democrats who voted to start the process of reopening the government, do you still include them in that characterization of courageous Democrats who have kept the fight going throughout this shutdown?
Well, I don't have much to say about those individuals, and they're going to have to explain themselves to their constituents and to the American people. I certainly believe that Senate Democrats, the overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, have waged a valiant fight over the last 7 weeks, defeating the partisan Republican spending bill 14 or 15 different times, week after week after week, and continue to oppose this effort of passing legislation that does not address the Republican health care crisis by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. But the fight is getting ready to shift back to the House, where we're going to work hard, hold the Republicans accountable. All of these loudmouths on the House Republican conference side who's been saying for the last several weeks that we have to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now is their chance. This week, they have to come back from their 7-week prolonged taxpayer-funded Republican vacation. They can no longer hide. They can no longer hide. Mike Johnson apparently still hiding, refused to even answer a single question today. That's extraordinary. But they're not going to be able to hide this week when they return from their vacation.
Leader Jeffries was also asked about the rehiring of federal workers who were laid off during the shutdown.
Do you trust, in this deal, there is language for President Trump and the Trump administration to reverse some of the firings that happened during the shutdown? Do you trust that the Trump administration and the president is going to sign off on that and reverse the people who have been fired?
We'll have to evaluate the legislative language, and we'll have a caucus meeting later on this afternoon, and we'll get a presentation from Rosa DeLauro, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. The overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats, led by Leader Schumer, are opposing this bill in the Senate. And they'll articulate, there are a variety of different reasons that the bill is being opposed strongly by Democrats in the Senate, the overwhelming majority of them. And there'll be a variety of different reasons that we articulate in the House. Now, certainly we're going to continue to stand by our hardworking federal employees. By the way, Donald Trump and Republicans, this toxic administration, they fired more than 100,000 federal employees prior to the shutdown that they started beginning. So, of course, there's reason to be deeply skeptical of the administration and their motives as it relates to the hardworking federal civil servants and the federal workforce. And we will continue to be deeply skeptical of their intentions. They spent the whole year implementing the toxic parts, the most toxic parts of Project 2025. After lying to the American people last year, saying they didn't know anything about Project 2025. And part of that has been going after the federal workforce. So we'll see what the language looks like, but it doesn't change the core problem here, which is we need to decisively address the Republican health care crisis on behalf of working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And this from Politico. Congressional Democrats are livid after a handful of their Senate colleagues voted Sunday to advance the House-passed stopgap and end the government shutdown. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy called it a mistake. Vermont Independent Bernie Sanders called it a very bad night. And this from Representative Ro Khanna of California on social media. Senator Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for? And Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin said, don't endorse or say who you voted for in NYC despite there being a Dem candidate. Get Dem senators to negotiate a terrible deal that does nothing real about healthcare. Screw over a national political party. Profile of scourge next. And here's Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona earlier today on MSNBC.
Do you support Chuck Schumer to lead Senate Democrats going forward?
So, Chris, again, we found ourselves in a situation I don't think the Senate has found itself in before. I think under any president, Democrat or Republican, they're going to care about the American people's health care and care if they're going to be able to put food on the table and try to bring down costs, not do the opposite for the American people. So when I hear folks say things like that, I understand their frustration. But I also hope they understand that we all need to be on the same team here. And what matters at this point is restoring these tax credits if we can do it in December. And we're going to work really, really hard, and we're going to focus on getting the Republican votes necessary to do that. But beyond that, it's winning the election in 2026. This president controls the House and the Senate. He controls those votes. He's got, all the levers of power here with our government. So we have to win this election in 2026. And if we do, we can hold him accountable, and we can take some steps to try to improve the situation that millions of Americans now find themselves in, not being able to afford rent or mortgage payment or groceries or health care.
I will note, Senator, that given two opportunities, you did not voice your unequivocal support for Chuck Schumer, but his job, at least for the moment, is not over. If this compromise plan does lead to the government...
I will say, Chuck Schumer and the leadership of the Senate are dealing with an incredibly complex situation where, it's hard to find a way out. But I am going to continue to fight for my constituents and the American people to just make life affordable for them.
Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly on MSNBC. Again, you can watch the Senate as they take the next steps to reopen the government after 41 days at cspan.org, and get all of our shutdown coverage at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. You're listening to Washington Today.
Retired George Mason University history professor Peter Henriquez starts off his author's note writing, quote, "If anyone had told me in the summer of 2023 that I would be writing one more book on George Washington, I would have expressed extreme skepticism." In episode 6 of this Booknotes Plus podcast series in 2021, Professor Enriquez told us the same thing. But at 88 years old, he's back with another book on our first president, George Washington, his quest for honor and fame. In the afterward chapter at the end of the book, Peter Henriquez puts a special emphasis on George Washington and slavery.
Author Peter Henriquez with his book, George Washington, His Quest for Honor and Fame, on this episode of Booknotes Plus with our host Brian Lamb. Booknotes Plus is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today from SCOTUS Blog. The Supreme Court on Monday morning turned down a request from Kim Davis, former county clerk in Kentucky, to reconsider its 2015 decision recognizing a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. In a brief unsigned order, the justices rejected Davis's petition for review of a ruling by a federal appeals court upholding an award of $100,000 to a gay couple to whom she had refused to issue a marriage license. That petition had also asked the justices to overrule the 2015 decision Obergefell v. Hodges, arguing that a right to same-sex marriage, quote, had no basis in the Constitution. That from SCOTUS Blog today. Now to the ongoing flight disruptions around the country. The Washington Post reporting that more than 5,800 flights had been delayed by mid-afternoon and nearly 2,000 canceled as a result of the government shutdown's effect on air traffic controllers. The Post reporting that Chicago's O'Hare International and Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport were among the ones most affected, and that regional carriers, including SkyWest, Republic, Envoy, and Endeavor Air, were among the airlines with the most cancellations. National Air Traffic Controllers Association President Nick Daniels spoke to reporters today about how the shutdown has affected his members.
Yeah, this is one of the worlds where this shutdown isn't a light switch. It's not just on, and it's not just off. Air traffic controllers have to go in and be perfect every single day. And they know, based on what is in the current bill, that January 30th will loom around the corner. Being made whole and being able to be back up is knowing that every shutdown that you could possibly be the political pawn never puts controllers completely at ease, but getting them paid is the priority so they can live their lives and ensure that they have the proper compensation. It's the right step in the right direction. Whatever it takes to open this government and pay our members is what's needed right now. And we'll have to continue dealing with the fallouts and what the stress, added stress and pressure that this has caused.
National Air Traffic Controllers Association President Nick Daniels. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced today that the black box warning on women's estrogen-based products for hormone replacement therapy will be removed. He spoke to reporters about it this afternoon.
For more than 2 decades, the American medical establishment turned its back on women. Millions of women were told to fear the very therapy that could have given them strength, peace, and dignity through one of life's most difficult transitions, menopause. That ends today. The FDA is initiating the removal of a broad black box warnings from hormone replacement therapy products for menopause. We're challenging outdated thinking and recommitting to evidence-based medicine that empowers rather than restricts. When prescribed responsibly and started early, hormone replacement therapy transforms the lives of women. Hormone replacement therapy has been found to reduce the risks of cardiovascular disease and mortality by as much as 50%, Alzheimer's disease by 35%, bone fractures by 50 to 60%, as well as reducing cognitive decline and all-cause mortality. In other words, extending the lives for as much as 10 years. It helps women sleep better, think more clearly, and live fuller, longer, and healthier lives. In short, it restores balance, not just hormonally, but emotionally and physically. That's why in 1999, approximately 27% of postmenopausal women took hormone replacement therapy. But then in 2002, a study called the Women's Health Initiative found that women taking hormone replacement therapy may have an increased risk of breast cancer diagnoses, not mortality, but diagnoses. The study was not statistically significant, but it triggered a media frenzy and led to the FDA applying unscientific black box warnings to all hormone replacement therapy products in 2003. The label was designed to frighten women and to silence doctors. It warned of diseases and dangers that the data simply did not support. Bureaucrats at the FDA reacted out of fear, not gold standard science.
HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists President Stephen Fleischman said in a statement that his organization has advocated for the removal of the black box label for a while. Monique Yohannan, Senior Fellow for Health Policy at the conservative nonprofit Independent Women, said, quote, "Today's decision restores balance to women's health policy. For years, risk was overstated and benefit was understated. By aligning labeling with current evidence, the FDA is giving physicians and women the clarity they deserve to make informed choices." You can see all of today's announcement at cspan.org and C-SPAN Now. From the Associated Press, BBC Director General Tim Davie and new CEO Deborah Furness both resigned on Sunday after criticism of the way the organization edited President Trump's speech the day of the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. The AP writing critics said the way the speech was edited for a BBC documentary last year was misleading and cut out a section where Trump said he wanted supporters to demonstrate peacefully. A clip of the BBC Panorama episode shared by the Daily Telegraph appears to show different parts of Trump's speech edited into one quote, that from the Associated Press. In a letter to staff, Tim Davie said quitting the job after 5 years was, quote, "entirely my decision. Overall, the BBC is delivering well, but there have been some mistakes made, and as Director General, I have to take the ultimate responsibility." In another letter to staff, Deborah Furness wrote, "In public life, leaders need to be fully accountable, and that is why I am stepping aside. While mistakes have been made, I want to be absolutely clear. Recent allegations that BBC News is institutionally biased are wrong." Here's what she had to say to Reuters yesterday.
I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News and to work with our brilliant team of journalists. I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
Do you think the
Of
journalists
course
are
our
corrupt?
journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias at the BBC?
There is no institutional bias. Mistakes are made, but there's no institutional bias.
But why weren't the mistakes dealt with on Trump, on anti-Semitism, on women's rights?
I'm sure that story will emerge, but for now I'm going to go in and see our team.
Do you think the board activities...
President Trump posted a link to the Daily Telegraph story on social media and thanked the newspaper, quote, for exposing these corrupt journalists. These are very dishonest people who tried to step on the scales of a presidential election. The UN Global Climate Summit opened in Belém, Brazil today, and Reuters writing, it is unclear whether countries would aim to negotiate a final agreement for the end of the event, a hard sell in a year of fractious global politics and U.S. efforts to obstruct a transition away from fossil fuels. Reuters going on to write the world's biggest historical emitter of greenhouse gases, the United States, opted to skip the summit. U.S. President Donald Trump falsely asserts that climate change is a hoax. Now, several state-level officials are reportedly there, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Governor Newsom talked about it yesterday on CNN.
After here in Houston, you're heading to Brazil for the UN Climate Conference. You'll be the highest profile or the highest level U.S. official because the Trump administration's not sending anyone. Are you standing in for the president, or are you just representing California? What is your role?
Standing in for my kids and grandkids, for common sense, for our economic future. I mean, climate risk is fundamentally financial risk. It's a cost of living issue. Ask anyone in places like the coast of New Jersey or down in Florida. Ask folks in Louisiana or in my home state, California.
With the wildfires.
Get insurance. Your insurance has been dropped. The premiums are going through the roof. I mean, that's a housing crisis in the making. We need to talk about that issue more. It's also about competitiveness. China's going to clean our clock. They're flooding the zone, dominating in the automobile industry. Cross the zone in Asia and European Union, #1 exporter into Mexico. And we've got legacy companies that have doubled down. GM, with all due respect, sold out to the Trump administration and literally is trying to recreate the past as these guys are sprinting to the future. It's not just about electric vehicles. It's about the technology stack. They're dominating in batteries. They're dominating increasingly in softwares. They're producing 3 times more automobiles than the United States of America, China. And they are dominating the supply chains and manufacturing. This is a real crisis in the making. It's not just about the hot's getting hotter and the dry's getting drier. And so that's going to be my focus: financial risk, cost of living, and competitiveness.
California Governor Gavin Newsom on CNN yesterday. Politico Deputy Energy Editor Ben Lefebvre talked about the significance of Governor Newsom's attendance this morning on Washington Journal.
It'll have some impact. I mean, it'll show to leaders from Europe or from Africa or from Asia, other places, that there is someone who has a pretty high profile and pretty big portfolio in the United States who's actually showing up. I mean, don't forget, California's economy is like one of the largest in the world. And I think having the governor there kind of keeps a line open to them if they want to get messages, or if they want to deal with someone in the U.S. who actually can have some effect on the ground, even if it's only in his state, and kind of shows that the U.S. isn't totally exited. I think it's interesting in that even though at the federal level there's nobody, I think on the state level there are a number of people, not just Governor Newsom, but others on the state level who, even if you can't get a commitment from the feds, maybe you can get something in a number of states that kind of move the ball a couple of inches forward anyway. And, the other part of this is Governor Newsom has also been, pretty, I don't want to say blatant, but pretty obvious that he's got higher office in mind, maybe the next election. So for him, it kind of shows that, you can make relationships in Brazil with foreign leaders and, kind of get to know each other. So I think for him, it might be a little bit of a meet and greet for the world stage.
Politico Deputy Energy Editor Ben Lefebvre on Washington Journal this morning. And finally, today, the 250th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps. A Continental Congress resolution drafted by future U.S. President John Adams and adopted in Philadelphia on November 10th, 1775, created the Continental Marines to serve as a landing force for the Continental Navy. Over the weekend, Vice President Vance, himself a Marine Corps veteran, attended the Marine Corps Ball here in Washington, D.C., Here's part of what he said.
Whether we're a Lance Corporal born in 2006 or a veteran of Iwo Jima, the Marine Corps keeps us honest because it is the proudest organization of warfighters in the world, and we are proud to celebrate its 250th birthday. Now, I got this great big speech here. I could talk about Dan Daly. I could talk about Chesty Puller. I could talk about John Basilone. I could talk about all of the incredible Marines. I could talk about my friends, some of whom came home from Iraq or Afghanistan and a couple of whom didn't. We know that the reason why this organization is so special is fundamentally because we take the very best young Americans, we turn them into something even better, which is United States Marines, and we go and ask them, even when they're teenagers, even when they're not even old enough, some of them, to drink, we go and ask them to do the hardest thing in the world, which is to fight our nation's battles and to represent the United States all over the world in the proudest and most profound way possible. And I'm proud to tell you this evening that tonight, as we celebrate at the Commandant's Birthday Ball, from the young Marines to the old Marines, I, as your Vice President, am proud of you, and we're going to keep on winning America's wars for the next 250 years after this.
From Saturday here in D.C., you can see all of the Vice President's comments at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now app. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll discuss issues affecting veterans on this Veterans Day, including the management of the Defense Department under the Trump administration. First with Independent Veterans of America's Paul Rieckhoff, then with Concerned Veterans of America's John Vick, and historian Ann John Monsky, creator and writer of the series American History Unbound, on how the nation has commemorated Veterans Day over time. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.